you know, in my 30s, well, actually my middle 20s, early 30s. I shouldn't date myself. I hate to say how old I am. 54, soon to be 55, so I have a little history. And this is back when I had a libido, and I think that's how you say it, another word for sex drive. I just can't believe I was that wild and it was me. And you know, I've never told anyone, another lover or anything. I wanted to go to Germany and do theater, and my Fulbright got denied, and I wasn't really Fulbright material anyway. The most incredible thing is I fell in love with a sailor, and I'd never fallen in love with a sailor before. I always wished that I was a hippie. I had read this book by Ginsberg, and if it wasn't by Ginsberg, it was some kind of beatnik, and he talked about his lover. He had a black lover with flat little feet, and I kept thinking, oh, my feet are fat and flat. I was young at the time. I was like 15, and I was like, oh, I'd love a beatnik boyfriend, you know, like someone so romantic and kind of cool, into jazz and, you know, that stuff. And so when I saw Tom, it just hit me. It's like everything I had ever dreamed of, you know, and he was so beautiful. And he was a light, creamy color with, you know, gray-blue eyes, and he was tall and slender. He was like 6'1", and he towered over me, but he was so sexy. And he had this long, gray dreadlocks and kind of frizzy, kinky dreadlocks, and they were just so beautiful. And he had a tam on, and he wore it on the side, and you know, he always had these eyes like this, and I just said, oh my gosh, you know, he reminds me of a beatnik. And I had the whole island helping me meet him, and I was a street vendor, and the other street vendors would tell me, you know, when he was expected to come to town, because he was also a dealer, you know, and everybody smoked marijuana. And so I just remember my friend Jocelyn coming to tell me, he's here, Tom is here. And I just remember him breezing by me, and he said, oh, I'll be with you in a minute, baby. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, he called me baby. And it was kind of like, you know, a cool baby, you know, something a beatnik would say. He really knows everything, that I have this huge crush on him. And of course, he had to make the rounds with all the vendors and keep them supplied. And so anyway, we got together, and it was right during zero tolerance. That didn't sit too well with the island, where, you know, half the island, you know, smoked. And of course, Tom being a dealer and loving to smoke, it created a kind of rebellion. We used to go out on his boat and just smoke spliff after spliff, and you know, I'd almost be sick from marijuana. No more, no more. And they say, you don't believe in zero tolerance, do you? So I'd force myself to, you know, take a little hit every other time it passed me. Although boats would come around now and then, the Coast Guard, and you had to be good. You couldn't be smoking a spliff right in front of them. Enough of zero tolerance. I want to get into an incident that happened. And I want you to be kind to me, because, you know, I'm bearing my soul, and I've constantly tried to forget this, but it somehow sticks in my mind, and you might agree it's something that should stick in your mind. I used to call when we were out in the middle of the ocean, like nowhere zone. And it was just so beautiful, and I remember we had smoked a lot of marijuana. You know, I became a marijuana junkie, just hanging out with Tom. And I just remember kissing, and, you know, and just like the so romantic, like shedding my clothes, and he was shedding his, and we were just, you know, I was just so confident. We were out in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, it was really beautiful, and I remember him, you know, I guess he had to do something sitting down, and so, you know, we were just like going at it. So we were basically sitting up, and so we were visible. It was something that should have been taken out of a novel. You know, you can tell I'm a romantic. I'm never really tied into reality. But then, right in the middle of screwing, a ferry boat came by, loaded with people, and we're on the top of his boat, screwing our brains out, telling Tom, stop, stop, we have to stop. And he was like, oh no, baby, don't worry, they can't see us. But I just remember the ferry coming by, and it was dead on, and it was only like a football field away, so maybe it wasn't even a football field. I want to believe it was a football field, but it was probably closer. And there was no one on deck, and all of a sudden, I see all these different colored shirts on deck, and it was all men. It was all men, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these men just came swarming out of their seats below the deck, and they were all lined up looking at us, and I would just, you know, Tom was uncontrollable at that point, and I kept saying, stop, stop, and he was like, honey, we can't stop, this is too good, and I was like, oh my gosh, and just seeing those men, and I was like totally petrified, and the way we were sitting, they couldn't see too much, but they could definitely tell we were screwing, and and I'm sure I was their entertainment for like the year, and so, and just thinking about being inside all those men's head as part of their fantasy, it's just kind of gross. I was like, oh, to use a pun, screw this, just when you think you can be by yourself in the middle of the ocean. I guess that old saying, no one's truly alone. There's always something, somebody. That was the last time we did that. I just said no to everything, unless it was like below deck. And even though it was a small island, nobody ever came up to me and said, oh, I saw you screwing on the boat that time. Now I feel guilty. There's like a guilt that sets in, and, why did I do that? And, why was I even with him, like someone that had so little respect for me, and like he didn't even want to stop, he's just interested in his own, like pleasure. And some of that is tied to like how he treated me too, like remembering the whole relationship, how he just took off. So he pops back on the island, St. Thomas, about 2 months later, and he says, oh baby, I've just been to Jamaica. I was just like, does he think I think that's cool? And so I was just so hurt. It must have been his makeup date. He took me to this beautiful field. We went on a little hiking walk, and I believe it was on the west side of the island, and it was just beautiful. And it was just so romantic, rolling hills, kind of dry grass from the sun. And even though it was like, maybe 4 or 5 o'clock, the sun was still bright enough. And he just started picking these mushrooms, and it was like, hey, you can eat these, baby. I was like, okay, that was an out of this world experience. I can't pass it up. I was a little bit of a rebel myself, and so in a very sedate way, in a New England way. Okay, I just started picking these mushrooms and eating them, and I ate about 3 or 4, and then. There's nothing like fresh food because the effect was immense and it was almost immediate. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am like really tripping. And, I just don't think I can make it out of this field. And he said, Miss Mary. And he never called me Miss Mary. It was like he was putting on this kind of like 50s charm, like Leave It to Beaver charm. And as I said, he was like 20 years older than me. So he was kind of from a different era too, and that's what made him so romantic too to me. And so, I just said, I don't think so. And I just remembered the words came out even before I could think about them, and I just said, no, that should have been a secret. That should have been something I kept to myself. I should have said, yeah, we can take it slow. That's about it of my Tom era.